Sucking air from a self-contained breathing apparatus, separated from death by a suit measured in millimeters, is what they've trained for. Finding what others might miss, advancing upon that which others avoid, and risking much for the preservation of many. It's what they do. If you have not heard of the 3 Echo 9 community, you are not alone. They have the saber-rattling function and alarmist role of promoting the unthinkable, warning against the invisible, and motivating others against an enemy that many want to pretend does not exist at all.
We're a band of trained professionals, the only one in the Department of Defense. We're the only service that has a dedicated career field, a functional career field that does emergency management.
The men and women of 3 Echo 9 are emergency management specialists, trained by the United States Air Force to respond to any and all disasters, man-made or otherwise.
We have 2 very different missions. We have a wartime mission and a peacetime mission. Now, any career field in the Air Force is going to tell you the same thing. Wartime mission, peacetime mission. Ours, however, span a broad array of things that we have to accomplish. And they're very unique and they're very different, what our missions are. So when it comes to our wartime mission, what everybody sees, because they come to our classes, is that we teach chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear warfare. However, we're not just teachers. We also are the ones who respond to it, clean it up. We're also the ones who have to plan for it, make checklists and plans that cover all of it.
We're the only career field in the United States Air Force that comes out of school fully qualified to enter a hot zone. They're DoD certified hazmat technicians.
Years ago, the military had an NBC program to address the nuclear, biological, and chemical threats they believed they faced. As the threat of terrorism increased and the radicalization of extreme fractions multiplied, our military and nation had to adapt. Today, a chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and high-yield explosive response, known as CBRNE, has taken its place.
And then our peacetime mission also has to deal with natural disasters, enemy attacks. It has to deal with plane crashes, depending on the mission of the base. It has to do with making plans and checklists for all of those different things. It has to do with making sure that the population on the base is prepared, so it has to do a lot with teaching. We also have to equip these people if something were to happen. We have to make sure that they're ready to go respond or to help recover.
We do wear a lot of hats. I mean, we can be on scene, we can be back directing traffic at the Emergency Operations Center, conducting meetings, things like that. It's difficult. There's not enough time in the day to get everything done, but you do what you have to make sure that mission continuation and that everybody's treated the way they need to be treated.
It's absolutely mind-boggling, all the different trade and skill sets these men and women must master in order to do their job safely and successfully at the same time.
This job is all about analyzing what threats are possible, what if, and then trying to develop ways to combat that and mitigate it.
You know, back in the World War I era, we were an army in its infancy for the most part, and our ability to defend against any kind of chemical warfare was slim to none.
Over 100,000 soldiers died of exposure to chemical weapons in World War I, and nearly 1 million were victimized by them.
You know, if anything history has shown us, it's, you know, that we've learned some hard lessons about being prepared, being ready. You can see how we've come out of one major war, we've downsized, we've let our guard down, and then we were largely unprepared for the next attack. You know, case in point, you know, between World War I and World War II. Back in the early 70s, the Army actually disestablished the Chemical Corps because they didn't think that there was going to be a CBRN threat out there anymore. During some of the Arab-Israeli conflicts, we saw Soviet-made equipment that had CBRN overpressure systems in their armored fighting vehicles. And that was an indicator that the threat is still there because some of these threat elements were preparing to use it in a way that their own forces could fight through it and survive.
In March of 1988, Saddam Hussein dropped bombs filled with a deadly cocktail of chemical weapons upon his own people in the village of Halabja.
Back then, that's probably the one thing that scared people more than anything else was our readiness to defend against a chemical attack because we had seen how Saddam Hussein launched chemical weapons not only on his own people, but even against the Iranians during the 8-year war Iraq had with Iran. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there was a lot of weaponized chemical material that has kind of been proliferated into the hands of countries that previously operated under strict Soviet rule that were now on their own. And where these weapons went was anybody's guess. Now a lot of countries throughout the Middle East, it could be anywhere throughout the world, if they don't have the technology to pursue nuclear weapons, chemical weapons is the easy way to go.
Obviously, chemical warfare agents are nasty. They don't discriminate at all. If your mask isn't on right, you're done. You could be the most trained person in the world. You mess up one thing, and it's all over.
In March of 1995, the Shinriko cult released sarin nerve agent twice upon subway riders in Tokyo, Japan. The latter killed 13 and sent over 5,000 people to the hospital.
It's more than just chemical warfare material that poses threats to military units on the battlefield. It's toxic industrial materials.
Mankind has created numerous toxic substances, many of which support our daily lives. Toxic industrial chemicals known as ticks and toxic industrial materials known as TIMs are always around us. Derailed trains, factory explosions, and overturned fifth-wheelers remind us time and again these threats abound.
Some things that you might refer to as maybe regular everyday chemicals. If you employ those on a battlefield, you could inflict casualties.
There's not a whole lot you can do about that. Your chem gear is not going to protect you from that. You need a level A, or at least a level B, but you need supplied air.
It doesn't matter whether something kills you through contact with the skin, inhalation, or ingestion. Dead is dead.
Well, it is a dangerous job, and it's a dangerous job, and there's a lot of unknowns when we're going into these situations. The best thing I can say is the training. If you train to do this stuff, you gain confidence in your abilities.
There have been times, and they're in training, when I've got a bunch of VX nerve agent sitting on my glove, and I know that a very small drop of that on my bare skin that's gone untreated will kill me in 15 minutes. And I got a lot of it on my glove. Makes me, one, thankful that I'm confident in my equipment, but really hits home that, we deal with stuff that's just bad.
At the edge of the Ozark Mountains, tucked behind razor wire fences and significant security on Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, is a training facility like no other in the world.
When you pull up to the facility first time, it's kind of imposing to see the chain link and the barbed wire and the armed security force and the use of deadly force signs on the fence. We don't do that for nothing.
This complex, known as the Chemical Defense Training Facility, or CDTF, brings emergency managers and students face to face the most deadly chemical weapons known to man.
They told us nobody's died here yet, but they have all the technology and medical stuff if you're exposed to it to save your life, so it's not as scary.
We go to great lengths to protect the health and safety of every student that trains out here. And of course, that extends through every facet of our operation.
The scariest part for me when I was a student here was when it was time for us to get standard chloride. You know that it's gonna not be pleasant, but you just don't know how.
Cup your hands forward.
Breathe in, out, close your eyes, close your mouth. Breathe.
The coughing and choking of the unprotected individual during early testing is a good thing. Later, these same individuals will be subjected to even larger doses of standard chloride to check the form, fit, and function of the protective mask before entering a lethal environment.
I don't think anyone really wants to deal with the effects of a chemical agent. We've had soldiers vomit in their masks, and they still won't take them off because they know. And you just talk to them, hey, everything's gonna be all right. I'm right here. I've got you. And when we get them, when we pass them off over to the individuals outside the bay, they'll take care of them.
Every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine gets to go inside the toxic area at some point, hold a mock-up weapon, we call them rubber ducks, and we'll contaminate that weapon with VX. And together in buddy teams, they'll go ahead and use the standard decontamination equipment to clean that rifle up. We're talking, a lethal amount of nerve agent just inches from your face.
The reason they do this is to help us develop confidence in our equipment and in our gear. hey, this bad stuff is here, but we're okay because our equipment works. We can sense what it is. We've got this PPE on that protects us. That's the whole reason for going through this training.
When the 3 Echo 9 community isn't preparing for or facing man-made threats, it's dealing with a much more common threat from Mother Nature and the endless war and untold devastation that she wages upon her inhabitants. On 11 March 2011 at 2:46 in the afternoon, an earthquake measuring 9 on the Richter scale hit Japan.
I got stationed at Misawa Air Force Base to perform a special project for Headquarters Air Force Civil Engineering Support Agency. So I just happened to be there when the earthquake and the tsunami hit.
The quake is reported to be the largest to ever hit Japan and the 5th largest in the world since 1900.
It lasted for a good 3.5, 4 minutes, the shaking, and it was rough. It was very rough. Power was out, people on their iPhones getting hit or miss internet service. Were able to pull up videos from CNN. Oh my gosh, look at this. Look at this wave. Wow, this happened? This happened just a few hours ago. We had no idea.
Official records confirm that over 15,800 were killed and over 3,400 are still missing and presumed dead. As if an earthquake and tsunami were not enough, power outages damaged at least 3 nuclear facilities, causing catastrophic meltdowns.
It was a little bit frustrating to not know what our objectives were because it was so fluid and it was changing all the time. But we did have some overarching kind of elements that helped keep us on track. One of those was the Emergency Operations Center. That is something that emergency management builds and then also runs. We also had a CBRNE cell element that was in charge of all of our radiation monitoring. We also had field teams, and this is where a lot of our interoperability came into play. We had Navy folks, Army folks, and then also bioenvironmental technicians from the Air Force and then emergency managers, all working together to determine if there was radiation present, and if there was, how are we going to decon it and clean it up, and how are we going to deal with contaminated personnel. But to have that experience, to watch our equipment work, to watch our PPE work, was incredibly invaluable. Folks back in the States were extremely concerned about radiation after the incident that happened at Fukushima. They didn't understand what danger levels were, how much radiation was present, whether it was going to be harmful. If you come back 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when we were in the middle of the Cold War, probably every American citizen out there would have been able to answer those questions.
The instrument, a Geiger counter, is converting radioactivity into sounds we can hear.
Because it was a threat then. It was in our mindsets. And that's gone away. It's not so much of a threat anymore. But for emergency management, it's still a threat. We're still trained to understand what it means, what it's going to do to us, how to respond to it.
Today, we must guard against the unthinkable as enemies seek the ability to weaponize small amounts of radioactive materials into dirty bombs, and rogue nations with evil intent seek to develop nuclear capabilities. North Korea has been worrisome enough, but the constant saber-rattling and unprovoked aggression of countries like Iran leave little doubt to the escalating threat to America and its allies. Unlike nuclear explosions that vaporize large areas, a dirty bomb combines radioactive materials with high-yield explosives like TNT, plastic explosives, or even homegrown concoctions like those used by Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City. The difference between a nuclear explosion and that of a dirty bomb or radiological accident is clearly visible in the aftermath of Chernobyl. While one may level a city and kill thousands instantly, both leave death in their wake and a city uninhabitable for years to come. During a routine systems test at the Chernobyl reactor, a sudden power surge caused an explosion that resulted in the largest nuclear accident ever. 26 years after its release of radiation in Chernobyl, the city remains a ghost town. Over 350,000 people have been displaced, and the death toll in the thousands is still climbing.
Simply the fear that that could happen is largely what drives us to our state of readiness. And you know, we can't ever afford to let our guard down because you know, the employment of chemical, biological, radiological weapons doesn't take much, you know, to create a massive hazard.
Civil Defense Headquarters announced today that the sharp increase in the number of cases of illness during the last few days have led authorities to suspect that a biological warfare attack may have taken place.
Biowarfare is something that thankfully we haven't seen in my lifetime, and I hope we never do.
I think personally that a biological attack would be one of the hardest for us to pinpoint immediately.
We have to wait and rely on other people to start reporting symptoms, flu-like symptoms. People get the flu and don't even report to a doctor.
It's not really a visible threat. We don't prepare for it probably as much as we should. I have a little bit of fear of biowarfare.
The dispersal methods that could be used for a biological agent are so simple, so easy to get that it could happen at a football game at a high school.
Within a week of the terror attacks of September the 11th, 2001, someone mailed letters containing anthrax to several media outlets and a couple of United States senators, resulting in the death of 5 people and infecting 17 others. These acts of terror frightened millions of Americans, yet those responsible have never been officially identified. The scary thing about viruses, unlike chemical or radiological weapons, is that viruses mutate, replicate, hibernate, regenerate, and find ways to survive.
Anyone who actually is going to perpetuate a pathogen-type attack on the United States or anywhere in the world, it's something that's going to fundamentally change the way we live and how we respond and how it affects our everyday lives. And that's what terrifies me the most about our job.
Deep within an abandoned tunnel in West Virginia, the Center for National Response constantly trains emergency management craftsmen by challenging them with complex scenarios, intentionally designed to make them focus well beyond the obvious.
An opportunity like this gives our units the chance to put their money where their mouth is, because they say they're doing this, but now we validate their training at their installations and validate whether or not they're really working together, because these are not easy scenarios.
Basically, the first entry comes in, they're taking pictures, doing a site assessment, trying to get an actual drawing of the car, figure out maybe where they need to sample or what they can sample, what's in there, because we don't give them any pictures or sketches to start with.
We're seeing teams that are really good about ensuring that they use all of the equipment available to identify and get to the very basic level of what do you have and what does that mean to me as the public and the emergency responders as far as how that's going to affect us and our health.
Those who prevent, prepare, mitigate, respond, and recover from CBRNE attacks do so with an understanding that despite their best efforts, a day of reckoning may come. No matter how vigilant, no matter how hard, they've worked to thwart its inevitability.
You know, there are people out there today that will go to any means necessary to achieve their objectives, you know, even if it means crashing airplanes into skyscrapers.
If you remember when the anthrax scare happened, people were afraid of baking powder. They were afraid of pancake mix because there was a little bit on the outside of the box. Was it really something or not? And I think at this point, we've gotten to where people are like, we're good. We know we're good. 911 happened a long time ago. There's no way we would ever allow anything like that to happen again.
We're never going to be in an environment where chemical agents are used, or we'll never be in a situation where we get nuked and need to be able to survive after that and deal with the aftermath of that. That's the biggest danger with this job, is that a lot of times it doesn't get taken seriously.
It doesn't necessarily have to come from overseas. There are things that have happened in the States, in different states, that America as a whole is unaware of.
Threats are out there. Something large is going to happen that we're not prepared for and we're not training for, and that keeps me awake at night.
When it happens that America might not be ready because we've become so complacent in how we approach things, how we deal with these type of things, yes.
While many go about their daily lives oblivious to the real-world threats that abound, these professionals remain hyper-vigilant, expertly trained, and properly equipped to respond wherever and whenever duty calls.
We're pegged as being the people who are doomsday. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. Well, nobody wants to hear that. But the sky does fall. And that's what we do, is we prepare for when it does fall.
Stories like this inspire and challenge us all. You can help spread the word by simply picking up your cell phone right now and texting the word PATRIOT to 50555. Make a $5 donation and join me in helping ensure the sacrifice and valor of America's heroes is never forgotten. Thank you.